Hi, I'm Gloria White. Today is June the 12th, 2022. We're at the Orange Theater in Conroe, Texas, with Professor Annette Gordon-Reed. This video is sponsored by the Heritage Museum of Montgomery County. Professor Annette Gordon-Reed is a native Conroe, graduate of Conroe High School. She has won 16 book prizes, including the Pulitzer Prize in History in 2009 and the National Book Award in 2008. The Hemispheres of Monticello, An American Family, 2008. She is currently the Carl M. Loeb University Professor of History at Harvard University. Hi, Annette, how are you?
Just fine, how are you?
Wonderful. Can you tell us where you were born?
I was born in Livingston, Texas, which is Polk County,
Mhm.
just north of Montgomery County.
Okay. So when did you all move to Montgomery County?
I moved when I don't remember it, I was about 6 months old.
So you were a baby?
I was a baby, and my mother and father came here when I was 6 months old with my two older brothers.
Okay. So tell us more about your family.
Well, my father was Alfred Gordon Sr. He was born and raised in Livingston, Polk County. My mother was Betty Jean Gordon. She was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, but it just because her mother happened to be there. They are actually from East Texas, Moscow and Livingston. And she grew up partially in Livingston and partially in Houston, but they met as teenagers in Livingston at Dunbar High School, and got married later on and had us,
Okay.
my brothers Al and Jay.
Okay. All right. Okay. So you all came to Conroe when you was a baby. So and your parents lived in Conroe. Do you remember what part of Conroe you all came?
We were
Moved
in
to?
a place called Dugan.
Okay, because okay, Duggan, okay, because I know in Conroe during that time they had places like Duggan's, where predominantly were black neighborhood, Paris, Medley Quarters, and also College Hill.
Yeah.
And some places were called the Gooseneck.
Yeah, we started out in Dugan, which was near Booker T. Washington High School, which is where my mother taught.
Okay.
And then later on, when I was about 9, we moved to Powell, which is across town.
Okay, okay, and Paris. I know where Paris is. And so your mother was a teacher.
Yeah.
Okay, what did she teach? What grade did she
She
teach?
taught English, 5th grade English at first, and then later on 11th grade English at Conroe High School.
Okay, so she went from elementary to Conroe High
Yeah,
School. Okay, and what did your father do?
My father had several businesses. He had a funeral home, and he had a store,
A store? Oh, okay. Okay. Was it like a community store?
like a
in the
community store. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So about your childhood, how was it? Do you remember your first day of school when you here in Montgomery County?
I remember the week. I don't remember precisely. I can't say it's the first day, but I went to my first day of school at kindergarten with Miss Kilo was my kindergarten teacher. I don't remember that much about it, except I was an afternoon kid in those days.
Okay.
Kindergarten was half day, and I would go in the afternoon, and we would play and take a nap and ring around the rosy. It was not as serious as kindergarten is now, but I do remember being there with my friend who was also who lived next door to me, who was also an afternoon kid, Gary Reese, and we had a good time.
Okay. So during that time, the school was still segregated.
Yeah,
Am I correct?
yeah.
So tell us a little about. I know in your book I read about you remember your first day when you went to, I think it was Anderson Elementary School. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. My parents decided to send me to a white school, the white school as it would have called. It was not the only school, but they chose Anderson Elementary School, Hewlin Anderson Elementary School. And my father drove me to school and dropped me off. It wasn't a big deal.
Okay.
It wasn't. There was no escort, even though I was the first black child to do this, and it was an unusual thing to do. They all agreed that they wouldn't make a big deal about it, and so I got dropped off, and I went to Mrs. Daughtry's class. She was my first grade teacher, and we just proceeded as if it were normal, but it wasn't really normal at the time.
So how did you feel when you was did you feel in a certain way when you were the only black kid in the school? Or did that affect you in any way?
Well, I think I noticed that I knew that it was a big deal that I was going to this school, and I mentioned, I talk about the fact that on some days there were administrators who came and would stand in the doorway to look to see what was going on and to see how things were proceeding, but I just had a sense of being different. Some of the kids were nice, some of them weren't nice to me, but the teachers, I have to say, were uniformly uniformly supportive.
So all the teachers during that time when you was at Anderson were all those white teachers? Did you have any black teachers in the school?
They had no black teachers in the school. I don't think they even had any black janitors in the school. It was a completely white environment, as far as I recall.
Okay. So how long did you stay at Anderson?
I was first grade through the fourth grade.
Okay. So
And
once
then I went to Washington Intermediate School. Booker T. Washington was changed to, because since it had been the K through 12 school for black kids, it became an intermediate school, which was be 5th and 6th grade. And it was called Washington, but they didn't have Booker T. Washington up there. So it was some question about, is this supposed to still be Booker T. Washington, or should it be George Washington? I don't think people wanted, at the time I suspected that there may have been people who were uncomfortable with the idea of white kids going to a school that was named for a black person. So it became generic Washington.
Washington.
And I think it's back to Booker T now. It could be. I'm not sure. But at some point I think it may have been. But I went to Washington Intermediate School, 5th and 6th grade. And then I went to Travis Junior High School. And then on to Conroe High School.
Okay. So did you have any experience when you came back to Washington, Booker T. Washington, other than the name was changed and you had some questions about that? So were you all integrated then when you came to 5th and 6th grade?
Oh yeah. The Supreme Court, there had been something called a freedom of choice plan, and white kids were the parents were supposed to pick white schools, and black parents were supposed to pick black schools. And as I said, my mother and father picked a white school. The Supreme Court struck that down, the plan down, and then everybody had to be integrated. So by the time I get to Washington Intermediate School, we're all integrated. And it was interesting coming back to this place where I had been just for that year. And I knew because of my mother, and my mother's time there.
Oh, okay. So junior high, was junior high any different? Everybody, it was integrated then?
It was integrated then. Junior high was junior high. Everybody hates junior high. Junior high is a terrible time in kids' lives. They're changing and everything. It's really rough. But I was in the band.
What instrument did you play?
I played the tenor saxophone.
Wow.
That I had inherited from my brother, who had been playing but then stopped, decided not to play. Up until that point, I'd been taking piano lessons from 5 until that time, and I left the piano behind, and I've recently gone back to playing.
The piano?
Yeah, taking lessons again. I was in the marching band. I enjoyed that very much. And
was this you were still in junior high?
Yeah, still in junior high. And when I came to high school, I decided I wanted to do speech and debate, be on the speech and debate club, which had tournaments on Fridays and Saturdays, which meant I couldn't be in the band because the football games are on Friday. So I gave up the tenor saxophone and went in for speech and debate.
Okay. So also I understand when you were in high school you worked on flare staff, so you did a lot of writing. So do you remember when your interest peaked for history and things like that?
I liked history from the time I was a kid. I used to read biographies of famous people, for kids, sort of age-appropriate biographies and stuff, and I really liked it. And I always was just interested in the past and how people did things and how it related to what we were doing now. And I also, though, thought of myself from very early on as a writer. I always wanted to be a writer. I loved reading James Baldwin. When I was a teenager, I discovered his writing, and it meant a great deal to me. And so I had an idea that that's what I wanted to do, that I might want to do in my life.
Okay. So in high school, did you do any, did they have any book clubs and writing clubs when you were in high school, Conroe High School?
Well, I was on the Flair staff, but I was also on the journalism staff for the newspaper. So I wrote for the newspaper as well, and that was fun.
Okay.
And I tried my hand at writing just on my own and practicing writing, but I didn't get serious about it, obviously, until I was an adult.
Okay. Tell us about the debate club. How was that?
That was great. I enjoyed them. To go to these tournaments, we would compete against all the kids in Houston, the Houston area, and there was also the drama club was a part of this. So a lot of I went to school with a lot of and was friends with a lot of theater kids, the kids who did drama and so forth, and it was great to be able to go down on a bus, with all of your friends, and they would go off to various competitions. I actually with my partner Jim Devlin. We won a tournament once,
Wow.
and that was good. And we had a trophy. This I may still be in Conroe High School in their trophy case. Um, but it taught me a lot about presentation. It made me pay attention to the news because these were topics about things that were happening in the world. And I think it's just great training for young people to be involved with speech and debate.
Okay, so once you graduated from high school, you went off to college. What college did you go to?
I went to Dartmouth College, which is in Hanover, New Hampshire.
So you really left. You left
west.
Texas, didn't you?
I left Texas. I left the South. I left Texas. I wanted to go away to school, and I wanted to go away. I had this sort of romantic idea about New England, going away to college in New England. And so I went up there not knowing that, what winter would really be like. But I love Dartmouth. I made some good friends there, and I had a good time there. But it was very different from here.
Different.
Very, very different.
So when you left, did you know what you was gonna major in? Or did you wasn't sure?
Well, I had thought about law. I thought I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to be a writer, but I, at this point, sort of thought that that may not be a very practical thing to do. That if I wanted to write, I could be a lawyer and do that on the side. I didn't really realize how tough practice is, how hard that is to do. And so I had in my mind that I was going to go to law school, even when I went to college. And sure enough, I did. I was there and then applied to law schools and applied mainly to law schools in the Northeast. I think I applied to UT. I would have come here to UT, but mostly schools in the Northeast.
Okay. So once you finished at Dartmouth, you went to what law school?
I went to Harvard Law School
Okay.
after Dartmouth, and met one of the most important person in my life now, my husband.
Uh-huh.
We were in the same dorm. We were
Okay.
in the same class section, and in a small section that you have in law school, we were in that as well. So it was sort of like fate driving us together. And I met him the first week of law school at the Black Law Students Association's picnic.
Okay.
And so, I mean, it was important to go to law school, but it's also important that I met my husband there.
Okay, and your husband, so you met him there. So after y'all met, how long was it before you all guys got married?
We got married the day after graduation.
Wow. Okay.
And because all of our families, he's from California,
Uh-huh.
and his family was out for graduation, my family was out for graduation, and all our friends were there. So we decided to just, instead of making people fly across the country to Texas or California, we just had the wedding there in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Oh wow, that's nice. I mean, that saved people time, and so everybody was there. So that's well, congratulations. And you say y'all have been married for quite some time now.
38 years.
Okay, and you all have
We have 2 kids,
okay,
a
son?
daughter and a son,
Okay, all right.
Susan and Gordon.
Susan and Gordon. Oh, okay. So that's your last name. That's
Mhm.
That's so okay. Do you remember the first book you wrote? Can you tell us about how? Well,
The first book I wrote was when I was.
Started? Go ahead.
No, the first book
you
I wrote was when I was 7.
What was the name of that book?
Lost at Sea.
Do you still have a copy of it?
No, I don't. Gosh, I wish I did. But it probably tells you something about, this was when I was in first grade. It may be something to the fact that I had a book called Lost at Sea while I was at the first year at Anderson. No, but the actual first book that I wrote and published was a book called Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, An American Controversy. And it was a book that was looking at the way white historians had written about this story, that Jefferson had children with this enslaved woman, and how they kind of dismissed this story in a way that I thought was insulting. And so I wanted to write a book that talked about how they wrote about it, and that came out in 1997.
Okay, so that's something that you was thinking about this from your childhood, and it's something you said this would be something I could write about, so I could tell the story from a different point of view.
Well, I first read about the story when I was a teenager, and there was a historian named Fawn Brody who wrote about the story in a biography of Jefferson. She treated the story as if it were true, and that caused a lot of controversy. I was about 14 when the book came out, and I remember seeing her on the Today Show, and she was people were really kind of going at her about this, for saying that this could possibly be true. So this was in the back of my mind, and I was at the time teaching. I left the practice of law and was teaching, and wasn't really interested in the subject that I was supposed to be writing about, and decided to write this book in 1997. And the book came out. It was well received. The following year, there were DNA tests done on some descendants, and it sort of corroborated, it supported what I had said in my book, and so that's how I really got into being a historian.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. And so, are you currently working or writing on any new books?
Well, I'm doing a second volume of the Hemmings family story.
Okay.
I'm taking them out of Monticello after Jefferson dies, and one branch of the family remains in the black community, and another branch goes into the white community. And I kind of compare what their lives were like based upon that decision. I mean, they're the same people, but one group, even though they look pretty much white, say, we're black. They identify with black people. And the other one goes into the white community, probably, well, not definitely because of their children. They wanted their children to have a particular kind of life. So they chose one group of family members over the others. You know, they had to leave their mother and their brothers and so forth behind so that their kids could live, you know, as white people with dignity in the United States. And so I follow their story.
Okay. So, your first book, you say, was Lost at Sea when you was in 7-year-old. Then you did the American. The second book, you
The
actually
Thomas Jefferson
Thomas
family.
Jefferson. Okay. And so when you're writing, I know it's got to be intensive. So do you have to carve out time to do that? So and it's just something that you love to do. So you like the historical part because you say you love history. And so what about? I mean, you're back here in Conroe today. You know, we're going to discuss your own Juneteenth book today. And so what about the history of Conroe? I know it's in the book. We're going to learn about the book. But so you have any special memories or something that you would like to share with us about history that may not be in your book, or something that you would talk about?
Well, you know, I think I just had such interesting feelings. I came from Houston, driving back to my hometown for the first time in a long while, and by myself. And we sold our family home a few years back, and so there's nobody here anymore. And so it's a weird feeling. You know, I remember when I came into Intercontinental, and I felt really emotional because that was the site of, you know, my father would greet me, my mother, when she was alive, my mother would greet me, and even when I had kids and I'd bring them down here. So there's like a flood of emotions. I think what I would like to share with people is that everybody should think about the importance of place. You know, how you're formed. You know, I don't live here anymore, but this place shaped me, and that's a part of history as well. If you think about, compare a country, for example, to a person, all of the things that went before go into making the country what it is, whether it's about race, all of those things. And as it is with us, you know, I'm not from here anymore, but I will always be from here because this is where I was raised.
That's where you got your start, even though you was born in Polk County, you came here. So that's amazing. So is there anything else that you would like to share with us? I know I think you live in Cambridge. I know I'm reading you see between Cambridge and New York City. So
yeah.
Do you used to train?
No, I teach at Harvard, which is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I live in New York. My husband's a judge, and you know, can't move to Cambridge. So I'm in Cambridge Monday through Wednesday typically, in New York the rest of the week. And it's kind of nice because Cambridge is a much smaller than Manhattan. It's a city, but it's much more manageable, and so it's nice to come from Manhattan to a place that's a little quiet.
Okay.
And Manhattan is action all the time, and even though I live in a place that's not, you know, that is not as it could be more active, but it's Manhattan. It's nevertheless very, very dense and so forth. So I think I really enjoy the contrast and the change, and I fly.
You fly. Okay,
Yeah.
you fly.
And sometimes I take the train,
Right.
but flying is faster.
A whole lot easier. Well, okay. So is there anything else you would like for us to know about you that the people that's going to be watching this video in the future could learn?
Well, how much I enjoyed my childhood here. I mean, it's strange to think of a place that was segregated and the kind of racial tensions that existed at that time, but it was a community. And I want people, when they look back at that time, even though you think about the problems of segregation, you want people, I want people to understand that blacks did have a community, and they cared about each other, and it was important.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Professor Gordon Reed, for this opportunity.
Thank you for asking me.
Wow. Thank you.